and welcome. Today I am with Bryan Hymel, an opera singer, a tenor, a soloist of the most important opera houses in the world, including our local Covent Garden, of course, the Metropolitan Opera in New York, the Opera Nationale de Paris in France, and all the main opera houses you can think of. This is really the height of the career for Bryan, and congratulations on this.
Thank you.
My first question, do you ever find yourself singing in the shower?
Sure, of course I do, especially if it's before a show or even before a rehearsal. I just like to, test my voice, warm it up, maybe not go 100%, but certainly I test it and see where we are.
So does it mean a very long shower session?
Sometimes, yes.
Is it your main practice room?
Maybe not my main practice room, but a significant one, yes.
And what are your main practice rooms? And by this question, I mainly mean the practice rooms where you've been with your main teachers.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I did what I considered the meat of my training, and especially the fine polishing of the training at a school called the Academy of Vocal Arts in Philadelphia, and I was there from 2005 to 2008, and it's a beautiful old house that is very. It makes it feel really intimate and really special. It doesn't look like a typical school. It doesn't have that kind of sterile environment. And there was one room that I did a lot. I had all my voice lessons there, but also a significant amount of coachings that I did with my main coach is a French guy by the name of Laurent Philippe. And he and I met there and we coached in this room. And so I would say that is kind of the womb, as it were, of where this all got really going. And then since I've left school, we end up, he travels, to meet me in different places. He was here in London. He's going to come back to London. He's been in Paris, Amsterdam, New York, Philly, New Orleans. He comes to our house and does that too. And so I would say the next place now that we have our home in New Orleans, he comes down twice a year, stays with us a week in our guest room, and we rehearse about 3 hours a day, and we get it done there. So yeah, that's where the real
main teacher.
It was a coach. So the difference between the teacher and the coach: the teacher deals with your tongue, your jaw, your support, your throat, all of those things. The coach deals with the musicianship, the languages, the style, all that kind of stuff. And that, I think he's not just an expert in French. He also works a lot in German and Italian. And so that way we get to, but because I've done so much French repertoire, I think he and I have just hit a really great stride together in that, because he's French, not just because of the language, but he also knows all the French repertoire, and not just Romeo, Juliet, Carmen, this stuff. He knew Les Troyens before I did. He knows, all the obscure things by Aubert and.
Are you grateful to him?
Of course, grateful beyond measure. I mean,
how do you express your gratitude?
Well, I am as nice to him as possible. I mean, he's really like
many hugs.
He's really like a family member at this point. I mean, our children call him Uncle Laurent. Oh. He comes and stays with us, and he's also a dear friend. I mean, we go running in the mornings, and that's where we do our kind of like guy talk and just talk mainly about career and about family and about stuff like this, about his relationship with his parents. And
so you're very close to him.
Very close, yeah.
You can absolutely trust him.
Absolutely.
And you trust his judgment as well.
Oh, yes, by far.
Because for musicians, it's important to have a third ear in the audience.
Always.
In the theater. And of course, your wonderful wife, Énée,
yes.
is one ear, and your coach, teacher, friend, uncle, Lord, is your second ear.
Absolutely. And and especially now that we have our children, she is not able to come to as many rehearsals as she used to before we had the children, particularly when we're on stage and when we have the orchestra, because this is when the balance might be off, or, you just, as you said, you can't be out there hearing and doing at the same time. And also just to see how it looks, maybe a certain staging or something else is not, it's not quite that, or it doesn't, paint me in the best light or something like that. So it's really great to have that. And then also too, my third ear, as it were. My third ear is kind of my voice teacher, who also comes. He's been here in London for all the big debuts, Troyens, Carmen. He will come for Les Veuves Siciliennes. He came the first time. He will come for Cavalleria. So I'm very, very lucky to have this team that is willing to travel and able to travel. A lot of times, I know a lot of my colleagues, their teachers are maybe a little bit older and up in age, and they can't travel as much as they would like to. But it's invaluable to have all of them there to kind of just make sure that it comes across exactly the way we want it to.
Wonderful. My next question is about the relationship with your instrument, with your voice.
Yes.
For pianists, the piano needs to be in tune.
Sure.
Violinists and cellists and viola players, they want to have an Italian maker,
right,
preferably Cremona maker.
Right.
And of course, they always look for the best violin maker if we're talking in modern language. And when I read your interviews, you often say, I'm trying to understand my voice, I'm trying to find...
Yeah.
So tell me, what is your relationship with your voice?
It is complicated. It's a complicated, I mean, the Facebook status, my relationship is complicated with my voice. But, I think it's mainly complicated because, obviously we carry it around with us all the time. All the emotions that we feel, all the air that we breathe, all the things that we eat and drink, they're all, your stomach is right here. Many singers talk about acid reflux issues. Many singers talk about allergies. When you're constantly in a different place, your immune system and your respiratory tract are kind of being assaulted by even the different seasons within the same city, the flowers, the plants, all these kind of different things. And I think we would all agree that sleep and a good diet, not too many fried foods or too many acidic foods, tomato sauces, spicy foods. These are the things that if you stay away from those, you're kind of okay. That being said, I know lots of singers that drink 5, 6 coffees a day, which is obviously not very good for that, but the caffeine kind of gets you going. I know some people who don't have any dairy, no cheese, no yogurt, no milk in their coffee, things like this. It does become, and it changes your relationship and your understanding and what your instrument kind of can handle and what affects you and all that stuff. I mean, I would say the biggest things for me right now are like stress and sleep. And it probably has a lot to do with the fact that we have 2 young children and they are just very active and they're up early sometimes. And so you don't get to sleep, or even if you do get to sleep, it's not, quiet, peaceful, really rejuvenative.
Do you sing lullabies to your
Sleep.
children?
They don't like me to sing. No, they don't want me to sing. They say, Dada, please stop singing. And so, yeah,
the privilege.
I guess, well, maybe one day they'll change their minds. But at this point, no, they're not so keen on us singing, but they love to sing themselves. I mean, they both sing almost constantly.
Out of tune?
No, actually, very, very well in tune, I must say.
And being a pianist in the past, do you accompany them?
We've done it a couple of times with Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and some other ones. I bought the Frozen songbook, hoping that they would love to do that. They don't want anything to do with it. But they're still young. I mean, 2.5 and almost 4. I think, give it another year or so and we'll be golden.
When you were a kid, did you want to be a singer?
No, I didn't.
Policeman or fireman?
No, I didn't know any singers. I mean, I don't come from a musical family. I come from a family that appreciates music, but no one that actually had the opportunity to study or even study seriously. I think my mother took piano lessons for a little while. My grandfather played the trumpet in the band, but nothing like what we do. But they were always super supportive. They were really, I think it was different, and so they were interested in learning and finding out more about music and about the arts. But I was really, really lucky to have them support me as much as they did, considering they don't know anything about the world of music, about how does one start a career? How does one, once you get your career, is it sustainable for a family? All these other kinds of things that we started to figure out once it's a little bit too late.
And who did you want to become?
I wanted to become, I think at first I wanted to become my first music teacher. He was the organist at the church. He directed a church choir and he taught voice lessons. And I thought, oh, that's probably a pretty great life. You just do music all day long.
But it was music related.
It was music related. It was music related, but not singing. I sang as a boy, and so I sang, as a boy soprano, and I felt a bit conflicted because it sounded like a girl, I mean, you sing in the high range, and you're kind of like, man, I was a big guy even when I was younger. And so it just seemed odd to me that, here's a big guy, and he goes, I don't know. So I love being in New Orleans.
Even higher than
exactly. Being from New Orleans, I wanted to be a trumpet player. I mean, that's a jazz trumpet player. Being a jazz trumpet player in New Orleans is like being a tenor in Italy. You really just, everybody wants you there singing, playing at their parties and their events and stuff. And then I got braces, and so that kind of messed up my embouchure for the trumpet. So I put that away for a little bit, and then I concentrated more on piano. And as you well know, it takes hours and hours and hours and hours of daily practice in a room by yourself in order to concentrate to be at that level. And I couldn't do it. I just, put me in there for an hour, and I needed to talk to somebody. I was like, okay, I'm finished practicing. Maybe I'm going to go see if there's anybody by the drink fountain or the coffee machine or something.
So you're very social.
And I am very social, and so I did it, but I enjoyed playing, and I was good enough. I mean, I worked almost, more playing piano than until my actual opera career started than I worked in any other part of music. But I could do everything, a bit of jazz, a bit of this, but it wasn't like super technical work. It was more, yeah.
Right. Musicians, instrumentalists,
yeah,
they have a very direct relationship with composer.
Yes.
So it's just two egos, basically, the ego of composer and the ego of musician.
Indeed.
And so the game begins.
Yes.
And you either win or lose. But I really think that there is a bit of a directness in this. Whereas with opera singers, you go through the librettist, the director, and the conductor. And only then you meet the composer. So it's a really serious collaboration there. So who's the boss?
Oh gosh, I would say in the performance, the conductor is the boss. The maestro is the boss. He picks the tempi. He controls how soft or loud the orchestra will play. And the stage director, I would say now in the world of opera, the stage director and designer, these are the real bosses of the business.
Even more important than conductor.
Well, not in the performance, but in like, say, everybody says, oh, I'm going to Salzburg in this, or what are you seeing? Oh, I'm seeing this. Who's the production by?
So the management-wise, you mean?
Exactly. It's just kind of the, especially, well, no, I would say that's everywhere now. Everybody wants to know whose production it is. And that's great. But what it does is it makes things a bit more complicated because the production is about how are we going to tell this story that's been told for 100 years in a different new way that will somehow tell the story more clearly or from a certain perspective that we're not used to considering when we look at the story. And that in itself is kind of different than the music. The music is almost just there at this point because everybody knows La Bohème, Traviata, all these ones, the Carmen. And so sometimes you get a very different aesthetic from the staging and from the design and the sets and the costumes. And sometimes it's a bit jolting because you're like, well, the music is so beautiful, or it's so kind of traditional, yet I'm looking at something that's very modern. I mean, it's kind of like having Jeff Koons at Versailles. You know what I mean? Like you're surrounded in there. But then once you think about it, you understand, oh, okay, right. So this is what, the royalty of today would have decorations like this. And so although the music is stuck in the kind of, I don't want to say museum because it is very alive when we recreate it all the time. It's still more or less, if you hear dun dun dun, well, that's La Bohème, no matter which recording, no matter which year, and in which country, and even which language at that point, but you know what it is. When you look at a production, sometimes, I mean, there's a group on Facebook that says, I forget the name of the group, but it's about modern productions, and they take like a snapshot of some crazy production and say, guess which opera this is from. And I mean, sometimes you really have no clue.
Really?
And then once they tell you, you're even more shocked because you're like, how did they, what?
Is it because we live in a very visual world?
I do think that that has a lot to do with it. And it's also just kind of, I don't want to say a fad, but it's a trend of the way that the opera world is going.
Is there a trend of being provocative, shocking?
I would say that there is definitely, you know, I think a lot of people would say that they're not trying necessarily to do that just for the sake of being provocative, but I see it. I mean, I know these pieces, and I think the director's just doing that just to get something. But I mean, you know, when we're in a situation where opera houses are not always filled to capacity, certainly the issue in America is that we are trying to figure out ways to get a new, younger audience in there. And I think that this is as good of a chance or a try as anybody can do to try and get people to come in and see something because they think opera, it's like, you know, people with horns and Viking sticks and things like this. And that's not necessarily appealing to our generation. You figure that's something my grandfather might have liked, but it's not what I like.
Right.
And so I think that they do kind of do that knowingly. But I don't think they would say it's at the you know the music and the art is a casualty of that.
Is there something that for yourself that you would never do for the sake of the promotion? Or
oh gosh.
You would never go topless, for example.
I have been asked to be naked, which I didn't do, but I did have like a kind of underwear that was not very covering. This was years ago in Wexford.
Is there a recording of it?
I don't think so.
Good.
Thankfully, yes. I don't think you will find it. Maybe some pictures, but I doubt it. No, I mean, there's, you know, I think at this point, you know, I spent so much. Now, it's funny because I couldn't practice piano for hours by myself. And with singing, you can't really practice hours at a time without, you know, killing your voice. But I do spend a lot of time now that I have an understanding of the technical ability and language of being able to do things in different ways. I find that interesting. And so I do spend a lot of time of trying to figure out how can I approach this note or this phrase a little bit differently, and how can I make sure that my technique is calm and as relaxed as possible, so that I can paint the words in the way that I would like to do. Is it more of a mental practicing, or it is a lot of mental practicing, because there are, you know, only so many times you can try to do something without, because once you get a little bit tired, you could keep practicing it, but it almost doesn't matter, because your voice will feel and react differently when you're fresh, when you're tired, when you're sick, all these different kinds of things. And in a life, you know, I sang 53 performances last year, and not all of those I felt great. I mean, that's like opera shows or concerts. And some of them you feel great, some of them you feel okay, some of them you don't feel great at all. Hopefully there's none of them when you are sick, but that does happen, you know. And so you have to have enough of a margin of error to where if, oh, well, you know, maybe I didn't sleep so much last night, or the kids were up, or I didn't, you know, I had a stomach, or whatever, anything. Right. The life that happens, we are singers and artists that are also living our life. We're not just put away in a box like a cello or a violin or something and just take out next time no matter what else happens. No. You know, when, you know, I've had, my grandmother passed away when I was in Paris right before the opening of Traviata, and there was no time for me to get home for the funeral. And, you know, and so that's something that's in there that you have to deal with, that doesn't necessarily affect you in the way that, you know, to where if you were sick, but you're also kind of like mentally just shocked out of it, or just kind of like, wow, okay, well, we, you know, she was 91, she lived a good life, we knew that it was coming, but still, once it happens, it's there, and it's done. This is when you really need to act. And I can't go home to be with my, I mean, my grandmother has passed, but my mother, my family, the rest of my family, I mean, I've missed a lot of those weddings, funerals, all kinds of things that make life what it is.
That's the price that you pay, right?
It is indeed, you know, and I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm just saying that it is a reality, you know.
You mentioned when you speak about your performances, a lot of physicality of your profession.
Yes.
It's not only that you always have to do with your body, with your facial structure, with anatomy, with the
Sure.
physiology, but it's also the acting element of it. Right?
Yes.
Then, of course, there is the intellectual bit of it,
Sure.
which is learning the languages, knowing the phrasing,
Yeah.
knowing the musical theory, knowing
Yeah.
the whole technicalities behind the sound. And then there's the emotional element of it, when you deliver, when you make people laugh
Sure.
or cry or
Sure.
just be shocked. And how do these three spheres, how do they live together? What do you find also easiest for you and most challenging for you in these three aspects?
Sure. I think it's a balance between all of those things. You know, if you just stand as if I were in a coaching or whatever, and I'm concentrating just on the music and the language, I try to make it as easy and as relaxed and technically great as possible. But then you put onto that the next layer would be the words. You know, am I going to say, you know, when I'm saying this, am I ecstatic? Am I sad? Am I depressed? Am I about to cry? And so then you take away a little bit of the technique of the ease of singing to put the emotion in. And then once you've got that, then you do go on and put the physicality of the acting. Because if I'm sad or depressed, my body has to look sad or depressed. I can't be like, oh, you know, Alexander technique, I'm relaxed, I'm easy, and now I can sing this. No. So you have to start from the most relaxed position and place possible, add in the intent of the text, and then somehow figure, because sometimes when you're down and you're depressed like this, your body does look like this, but on the inside with the throat and the diaphragm and such, you're thinking, I'm open, I'm relaxed, and then you say what you need to say. So it is tricky, and there's really no, I mean, I feel like I went to one of the best training schools for opera in the world. And even still, we didn't have time to get to that kind of layer and level of specificity. You know, for it to be that specific, that kind of, and I think it's different for everybody. Not everybody thinks as technically as I do. I think with the repertoire that I sing, I'm forced to think very, very technically, because you won't make it through the night or the role if you're not as efficient as you possibly can with every phrase. You know, there have been other singers who are known to be stage animals, but they just kind of go out there and they give everything they have, sometimes at the cost of what it does to their voice and their long. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, it's, you know, a more common tale to hear someone who has burned themselves out rather than those who have gone on for decades.
So you have to be very clever.
You have to be very clever. I would say, you know, clever, shrewd, these are almost the most important things. Because if you're in your 30s and you're still working as an opera singer, everybody at that level is talented, has a special voice, and has something to say. It's just about how well can you preserve that while still making enough strides to set yourself apart from the rest of the pack of people who are talented and want it just as badly as you do, and sometimes more. And you just have, you know, I know lots of people that have decided they love singing, they love art, but they can't handle the pressure, or they can't handle the life of being on the road all the time. So you would like to think, I think we would all say, that, okay, the best singers in the world are singing at the Met, or the best voices in the world are singing at the Met in Paris and Covent Garden and such like that. And it's not always true, because I have heard people who have incredible voices and they're really beautiful singers, but they just either didn't have the mental strength, like, you know, skills even. Because I think, you know, and in talking with other people about performance psychology, and this could be in the boardroom, this could be in the operating, you know, theater. It could be anything. Anytime where there is pressure for what you are doing and everyone is looking at you, there are tools, there are skills. There are some people who are just better at dealing with pressure. But I think even those people, at one point, they get to a situation in their life where something, it gets to them, whether they're their personal life or whatever, or yeah, it can be anything. It can be any number of reasons. But then all of a sudden you need to have those tools ready to help you go to sleep the night before you have a big show, operation, Olympics, sports thing. Because if you can't sleep, then you're not going to be well rested. And if you're not well rested, then you're not going to perform well. And it's all these things that that are factors, but they're not factors in the way it's like, oh, well, you know, I have a sore throat, I can't hit the high note. No, it's like if there's all these things and I can't sleep, well, then the anxiety builds up and then they start compounding upon each other about how does one deal with stress. You know, I know there are people who go to the pub, or they go to the casino, or there are any number of outlets that people can go. And unfortunately, most of us don't go to the healthiest outlet first. You know, the most healthy outlet that I know people use for opera singing right now is the gym. And everybody likes to go because you go there, you can kind of clear your mind, and you can get some exercise, you get some stress out, and then you come back and then you're fresh to attack the rehearsal or the day or whatever. And I think also because, you know, we have these HD broadcast and movie theater things now, that the aesthetic, someone who might look fine in the room or fine on stage might not look as slender, I mean, on HD camera. And that's the reality of where we are now. Opera singers are not known for having the physiques of movie stars or, you know, pop stars or dancers, with the exception of me, of course. No, but I mean, there's not. I mean, that being said, you know, I'm lucky, one, to be a guy, secondly to be a tenor, thirdly to be a tenor in the repertoire that I sing. But even still, for me, there's not a meal that I sit down at ever and think, should I be not? I probably shouldn't be eating this, but there's nothing else that I can get because I'm on the way from home to the rehearsal. I have 20 minutes, and you try to make the healthiest choice that you can, because also too, it's about having the fuel to work and to think. I mean, yeah, you can pick up a muffin, or you can pick up a yogurt, you know, with granola, or you could pick up a banana.
You always go for yogurt.
Oh, always. I try to, but you know, I mean, this is the reality. That's the other thing. Just living on the road, and all these kinds of things.
You've mentioned that in America you're struggling with audiences, and you're trying to bring in the young audience.
Yes.
And so, tell me, how important is in general, the musical education for the younger generation?
I mean, I think that it's not only important from an audience standpoint and having people to appreciate the art that we're doing. I think it's really essential for children to develop social skills and the way to think and to problem solve. I mean, I think that that's the biggest tragedy of the lack of arts education that there is. I assume it's a bit over here from what I hear to other people.
It's absolutely universal.
You know, but I didn't go to a public school. I went to a private school, and so arts were funded and appreciated, not on the same level as, say, the sports even were, but it still was there.
But even in private sectors, things have changed.
Oh yeah, I hear that from talking to a lot of my friends.
Tell us why the music education is important.
It's important because, yeah, again, I think that it helps the children's brains form in a way of problem solving, and not just, you know, 2 + 2 is 4, 6 + 6 is 12. This is important, of course, but if you think about something like, okay, well, you know, if we're playing together or we're singing together, there are going to be parts where I have the melody, and so it's my time to shine, and then parts where you have the melody, and it's time that if I'm singing a counterpoint or a harmony to what you're doing, it's time to let you take over. And I think that that's about, you know, that's just one basic example of how we're both important, but we have different times to shine, and different, you know, there are music instruments that play low notes, there are ones that play high notes, there are ones that play fast notes, there are ones that play, you know, more long sustained tones. And I think it's just all about figuring out how we work together as humans.
And of course, the creativity.
And that's the other thing. And one thing that so Irene and I have started something that's based in New Orleans, but that we're going to do everywhere, and it's called Opus Opera. And the idea of Opus Opera is to take opera and pair it with other things. The first one we did was on wine, the second one's on philosophy, the third is spirituality. We have another one that's circus arts, visual arts is coming up. And the idea for that is it's not that opera can't stand on its own, because it can. But I know for my generation, if you can get people interested with something that they know they like, and then with something that they might be interested in, you will get them to come because they know they like wine, they know they like this, they know they like whatever. And then we give them opera kind of presented, but also not as a 3 hour, you have to take the whole thing at once. It's
Right.
more of a, just have a little taste of this. And that's exactly what we do and what we are looking to show, because I continue to learn lessons from art and from the operas and the roles that I do just by studying them. And this is the same in literature. If you're reading a book and you think, it's not just the words or the way that they're put together, which is something that is great to appreciate, but you learn about the struggles that these characters are having and the relationships between them. And I think that that's what makes it interesting, is the way that you think, this relationship is not unlike my own relationship with such and such. Like as a father of two girls, I would never go to see Rigoletto and not think about Rigoletto's own passion to keep his girls safe.
Of course.
There's no way I couldn't.
Yeah.
And I know, like, when, after I became a father, to go and to be the bad guy in Madame Butterfly. Nobody likes to do it, but, if you want to tell the story, somebody's got to be the bad guy. And to see the heartbreak, and then what happens to the child or what happens to the mother knowing that he's going to take the child away from her. I mean, it's all these kinds of things that just make you think. And that's, I think, the point. For education, it teaches children how to think and how to think for themselves. And if those children, when they grow up and become adults, they will then continue and probably be really good at it by that point, to be able to think for themselves. And today, I know in America, in a lot of places, we don't have people who can think for themselves. They hear somebody else say it, and if that's a really charismatic person, they're like, oh, that's great, I believe that. Did you hear what he said? And then they tell all their friends, and all of a sudden, we end up in a situation like we have today.
Okay. Tell me,
no
please,
political, sorry.
when and how to introduce opera to children?
I think that the way that we can introduce opera to children, and I don't know that anybody really has the answer to this. I mean, the way that I was introduced to opera was that a friend of my music teacher came in. He was an opera singer, and he just came in and sang an aria for us. I'd never heard a sound like that, and he was maybe 10 feet away, and it was in Italian. I didn't know what he was talking about. But it was Mamma quel vino è generoso from Cavalleria Rusticana. And I just was like, we just all sat there like, wow, it's such a complex sound that I think the sound of it on its own is enough. But then, like for anything else, you have to get more into it. And there are certain, Hansel and Gretel, the Magic Flute, the Zauberflöte, Janacek, Cunning Little Vixen, these other ones, there are really stories that lend themselves to being understood by a younger mind. But I don't know that we need to dumb it down. A lot of times people take things out of their natural, the original language, and put it into the vernacular, the language that everybody's speaking. I think this can be helpful, but I don't think it has to be, because I think there is a fascination with children of hearing a language that they don't know. I mean, we see it with our own kids. I mean, they speak a bit of Greek, they speak English, obviously, but they've lived in France and in London, and we're going to spend a lot of time in Germany this year. And they enjoy, I mean, they can count to 10 in all of those languages. Spain, we were in Spain. And so there's this idea in America that we're in America, we're going to speak English, and that's how it's going to be. But over here in Europe, obviously, it's not the case because you encounter people all the time who speak a different language.
What is your relationship with languages? How many languages do you speak?
Oh gosh, well, I try to speak English pretty well. We do a bit of French because we've lived in France. We spent 5 months there last year, 5 months there the year before. Obviously, I sing a lot in French. Italian is the language
so how is your Russian? How is your Snegurочка experience?
Yes, Snegurочка was wonderful. And it was a lot of fun.
Rusalka in Czech?
It's not bad. It's not bad, actually. And actually, I did my recording in Prague, so I already, we had, spent a good amount of time. Actually, in Wexford at the time, the chorus came from Prague, and so they all spoke Czech, obviously. And so I got to hear a lot of Czech. And I was very self-conscious because here I am saying just a string of syllables. I know what I'm saying, but they're not words to me in the way that I would think about it. But they were very kind, and they were very just appreciative that I was trying really hard and asking,
So let me reform it. In how many languages can you order gin and tonic?
Order gin and tonic? Wow, I guess probably at least 5. Yeah.
So you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
And the more gin and tonics I have, the better my language skills get. So there you go. But definitely French and Italian are functional. I mean, we can walk into a restaurant or even there was one time where we had to call the post office in Paris, and that was tricky. But we did it. My wife helped a lot with that. But we got it done. And the more, unfortunately, I probably hadn't heard another language besides Spanish being spoken, like I hadn't actually heard it in real life until I was 20. To think that it go 20 years on the planet. And I would say my dad probably was more like 50 years because America is so big and it's kind of so detached and it's so expensive to get your whole family from America over to Europe that it's not like taking a quick flight down to Greece from Mykonos or something and or just taking the train to go to France. And
you are, of course, an experienced person in dealing with stress. This is part of your profession, and you've mentioned that earlier. And we live in a stressful world, let's face it, whether you are in medicine or in sports or in music or in the city, in business, in management, in law firm, anywhere in the world.
Sure.
It's a stressful time for us.
Yeah.
And it's an uncertain time and a time when things are changing and we can't predict the future. And one thing is, of course, to think long terms, that the world will be a better place at some point, or we need to live right here and right now. So my question, if you could please give us a hot tip on how to deal with the moment stress, when you have to go and have an important presentation, or you have to go and perform right now and right here, and you are troubling, you are nervous. Maybe there is a breathing exercise that we could just share with our audience.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that you hit it right there. Breathing exercises are the best thing. Let's do it. Okay, so which one do you want to do? You want me to come up with one that I use?
Let's like really the best exercise you can suggest.
I mean, the one that I do, and this is maybe singer oriented, but I am a singer, is I do take in the breath in you as we sit up straight, just so that your ribs can expand without anything being crinkled. And you just take in the breath kind of slowly over 8. So
or mouth or nose?
I do both.
Okay.
Some people say that doing it through your nose is better and then out through the mouth. But when I'm singing and I have to take quick breath, I have to do it through my mouth and my nose at the same time. Let's do it that way. And if we're going to do it that way, let's just say over 4 counts. Okay. So you go in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, and do it 3 times. So I'll do it now. Second time. Last time.
Now we feel much better. Thank you,
much
Bryan
more
Hymel.
relaxed.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
My pleasure. Yay! Those were great questions. Thank you.